Hello and welcome to the EdTech Podcast. In this enlightening episode, we explore the intersection of artificial intelligence and education. Join us as we delve into the insights of Dublin-based expert Rita Bateson, who reveals how educators can harness AI's extraordinary potential while safeguarding our planet and students' futures. Discover practical frameworks for ethical AI implementation and learn how school leaders can focus on creating a responsible, human-centered AI future. This episode is perfect for educators, leaders, and visionaries committed to the future of education. Hello and welcome, Rita, to the EdTech Podcast. Would you be able to please tell our international listeners a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Thank you, Philippa. I'm so excited to join you today. I'm joining you from Dublin, where it is grey and miserable, and we also sit at the centre of the data centre hub for Europe, so apologies if the signal drops. It's one of my main themes that I like to talk to people about, the sustainability factor of AI. But I'm joining you from Ablama Learning, and I'm also an author for Hachette Learning and John Catt. And I'm here today to talk to you about all the work that we're doing around AI implementation, governance, what it means for pedagogy, and so much more. There's so much to think about in terms of ethical implementation, safeguarding, you name it. And international schools, they are feeling very overwhelmed, as we know. So we're very pleased and happy to be able to provide assistance, trusted partner, and to be able to do all the research for them that they simply don't have time to do. It's quite a lot, as you can imagine, for a full-time, overwhelmed staff already. Having AI disrupt absolutely everything, positively and negatively, it's just too much sometimes.
And you've just mentioned two things that I feel like nobody gives any airtime to: sustainability and the fact that it takes so many millions of data centers being built now to be able to cope with the capacity of AI and what it's doing to us. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I mean, Ireland is very invested in a direct foreign investment and tech centres, and we sit in a really geographically attractive place halfway between the US and Europe, and we're within the EU and all of these things. And as people are probably tired of hearing me say, a fifth of our electricity is now going to feed the data centres, and it's actually 50% in Dublin. It's past 50%. So there are days when it's difficult to get online. I can tell when there's a new Claude or Gemini model coming out, or a new OpenAI model, because of just the impact. And if they're diverting energies from houses and homes to make sure that we don't lose the data centres. And that's a real concern for humanity, but also for education. Because if we identify a problem, it's always education's responsibility to try and prepare students for that future and for that world. So we've been very keen in Ablama to mention every time we do a training, every time we do a professional development, that AI is at risk of being the next plastic. Like, we want it, we need it, it keeps people, it gives amazing opportunities and incredible unlocks. But could we be a bit more discerning this time? Could we be more careful? Could we equip students with the thinking around, how can I be discerning in my AI use? And that's really all we can ask for. We can't ask people to avoid it. We can't ask people not to use it or feel guilty eternally. But maybe we don't need another 1,000 memes. Maybe we don't need a deep fake for every occasion. So it's really important that, I suppose, I get that in early and often, because we don't talk about it enough. It's a very inconvenient truth. It feels friction-free. It feels so available. But we already know this freemium model. Like, we know all of the downsides of it. We know the dependence. We know the way that education is being slowly sassified. And I think it's really important that we give our students the agency, like a moment to think about, do I need this? Do I already have this information? Will I still be proud of my work? Am I using it as a bypass? Am I using it as an accelerant to my learning? Will it save me time genuinely? Or will I use that time wisely if I do save it? There's so many things for kids to think about. It's not fair to give them all of those issues without tools and supports and frameworks. So we're very pleased to have developed a lot of those kind of things to help teachers have that language to be able to say it to kids already without having to take on the cognitive load for themselves. So that's something that we're really proud of. Deliberation stations, evaluation stations afterwards. Can we consider before we use it and also after we use it? Are we reflecting on, was it a valid use? Was it an appropriate use? Has it made me a better learner? Has it made me a more dependent user of AI? We've gone deep very fast, haven't we, Philippa? But it's important.
We really have. Yeah, no, but it's so important. And I think without teaching students these skills, then they are just going to use it whenever they want to and not see the fact that, as you just said it so nicely, it's like a plastic. It is like just grabbing a bag because I can. And actually, I've got a load of reusable ones in my car, but I've left them, so I'll forget it. I'll keep walking into the supermarket. Actually, it's going, you know what,
I can do that myself. I do know how to work that out. I can ask that question to another human, maybe, and maybe get an answer. I don't always have to do it that way. Yeah.
And it's interesting, the schools that we work with often say that during the pandemic, our Google chats were really loud, our Microsoft Teams messaging was super ping, ping, ping all the time. And now they're quiet because kids aren't reaching for another peer, a teacher. They reach for AI first. So I think this is probably the last moment we have to course correct on that, to be able to say to students, like, before you reach for it, consider. And if you've considered all the options, and likewise with teachers too, let's be honest, with us as leaders as well in schools, we also have to be very conscious of our use and model for kids effectively and talk about it more. You know, some students are very alert to the sustainability impacts. They'll say it, they'll mention it, and then they'll carry on as previously, kind of carry on regardless, because everybody else is too, you know, and it's really important. So like for me, for example, I will not make an AI generated video because I know that it will create the same amount of energy consumption as if I watched all of the episode of Friends like 5,000 times. That's significant energy impact. I'm very careful with images because I know that one image is the same amount of energy as charging your phone 3 times. So if it's an image that does not already exist, okay, and it's going to be educational, not entertainment, then I'm willing to do it. But I won't iterate 1,000 times. I certainly won't argue with the machine when it gets it wrong. You know, these things are important to kind of put into your value system.
That's so interesting. And it just gives me flashes of all of the people that have currently been doing the new AI generated version of themselves, or previously, you know, the little dolls that people were creating of the, you know, the kind of action figures and things like that, when actually, and it's fun and it's exciting and it's new, but what a thing to compare it against. And when you hear it in those ways, I mean, I have to admit, I possibly have watched Friends 500 million times. It could just be as bad.
I think we all have.
But that is, it's quite shocking in terms of those real statistics. That's amazing.
But you also can't, I suppose, lose yourself to doom and gloom or abstinence, because that doesn't work either, right? But if it's a use case that will genuinely make your classroom environment richer, if it will genuinely save you time, if it can serve students in a way that we couldn't before, then that's totally valid. And then I say, absolutely, let's go for it. Let's use our AI literacy and our AI ethics in equal measure. And let's get the best for students, because there's so many amazing, you've highlighted so many amazing use cases, you know, for students with specific needs that were not being met before, for linguistic purposes. Oh my God, the unlocks are amazing. For the accelerant that it can give very stressed and overworked teachers, that's incredible too. But it's managing those things in the right way and making sure that we curate those use cases into a way that is totally manageable for schools. And that's part of the reason why I've written this book for the international school leaders, is if I were still in school as a head of school, I would not have time to do any of this deeper thinking, this reflection, this research. So we've distilled all of that for teachers and staff alike to be able to think, okay, what does this mean for governance in my school? What does it mean for safeguarding? What does it mean for our sustainability? What does it mean for our curriculum integration? How can I manage the sprawl in a way that I can actually also go home and sleep at night and have a life and all of those things? Because I think that's the problem, is there's so many conflicting platforms, vendors, ideas, motivations, tech, you know, big tech and what they're doing. So it's hard for schools to know what to trust and where to look for reasoned, centrist, moderate advice.
Yeah, I think that's so valid in terms of what I think it would be really great is if you could tell the listeners a little bit about your background, because you just sort of alluded to it there, but I think that really gives that essence of how you see this, because you see it from a very broad kind of, you know, 10,000 foot high viewpoint, don't you?
I do. I suppose I have the good fortune of having been in the classroom for a very long time. I'm very, very old. And also having been at the International Baccalaureate as a curriculum and assessment designer and manager, and have been involved in opening a school from a greenfield site up to, you know, 700 students here in Dublin. So it's been a really interesting ride. And when you think also that I write textbooks and pedagogy books. So for me at first, AI was definitely an issue. It was an existential threat. I was like, what is this? I have been through blockchain and NFT and coding, and what does this mean now? It's another waste of my time and budget. And it felt over that first year when the focus was on assessment and the threat that it was, cheating and everything else. And then the second year where it was shiny tools and shiny platforms. And now we're in a much more mature debate. I think it's useful for me to say, okay, well, what does this mean for pedagogy? What does it mean for the day-to-day existence of a school? What does it mean for the future of education? Now, how can I skill up and make sure that I can put all of those things together? Because quite often, like you say, there's no way that you could manage all of those different viewpoints at once. I think it's really important to acknowledge the schools don't know what they don't know. And I think when we mention sustainability, when we mention the ethics and the bias inherent in AI, when we talk about hallucinations, those are 3 huge topics. And that's like 1 hour of a session straight away. So I think it's an awful lot to expect schools to do all of that work, thinking and discernment on their own. I guess that idea of, bringing pedagogy, bringing leadership experience, and bringing all of the research together, that's what's put us in Ablama Learning in a very unique place, I think, to be able to serve schools in that way.
Which is incredible. And I think from my perspective, I believe very strongly that you don't get to the pedagogy without having really clear governance and structures for people to understand. So tell us a little bit about why AI governance is so essential.
Well, I think over the years, I've really changed my opinion. I often thought governance should be bottom up, written by people who are living in the classroom, who are experiencing all of the challenges, and the policies should be top down. And I've only kind of in the last 5 years, thanks to AI, flipped that entirely. Because I think the number of schools that I go into, and originally we were co-determining policies and writing things together and crafting a vision statement. And it was amazing how many schools said, no, please just tell us what to do. Please tell us the golden rules. Where is the hack? Where is the secret code that if we do it, then we know we're doing right by our kids. We know we're doing right by our expectations, our community. We're living by our values and our mission. And I thought that was really interesting. Staff feel really reassured when there's a clear message and guardrails for them, so they know that they're experimenting within a very safe walled garden. And I thought that really surprised me at first. I thought people would want to experiment and be free and have agency. And they do, but they do feel reassured. I suppose it's like kids who say they don't like a routine, but they crave a routine. It's a bit like that. They really do want to know, where am I running foul of the law? Where am I have a reputational risk? Where is there a social risk? What do I need to know? And then please, what do I not need to know? What do I not need to worry about? Really clear governance around vendors, around expectations of professional communication now, because there's a lot of schools that are suffering from the friction between teacher and student in both directions. I can't tell you how many schools I've been to where the students are saying, like, if I wanted AI feedback, I could get that myself. Like, I wanted you to look at my work. I wanted you to value me as an individual. That's huge. And that is only possible when you have clear governance.
I've seen that. You're right. And I've seen that firsthand from students who've said that they actually dislike certain teachers now because they just feel like they don't care. They've set a piece of work which is written by AI, and they've fed back using AI. And actually, if you said to the teacher which piece of work was mine, they can't tell you. And that is so sad. It's so really very sad.
But on the other hand, I find it hilarious that they miss the irony in that they're possibly submitting AI work to be marked by AI. But I also think it's a really good source of hope. If students still value human feedback, they really, really respect their teachers. They respect the learning process. That, for me, that's actually a really good sign. The longer they're irritated by AI feedback, the longer we have hope to be able to maintain that professional expectation. And I think that's great. I think what people don't realize is that students can go from room to room and see the same AI slop all day long, because you don't have that connected thinking. So that's why the governance is so important. We want to be really clear in our expectations with staff. We want to model best practice for students. And also then we need guidance for what does this look like in our curriculum, so that we can prepare students for the families who feel like, keep this away from my child, and the families who feel like, get my kid ready for the future they will inhabit, and everything in between. It's absolutely huge. So how would school leaders really know what research to do, who to trust, where to go next, when it's a moving target? Like every single week, you know what it's like. There's huge changes in AI, and some of them are totally irrelevant to education. They just don't matter. But everything 100%. Seems to be important and sounds equally urgent.
Yeah. And I think I've noticed there's a huge influx, again, a little bit like EdTech was sort of 10 years ago or so when I first started really digging into that area, where I felt like people were just in it for the money and actually not in it because of the power and impact that technology can have. And I felt like we were coming to a turning point, a tipping point where that was really changing. And EdTech companies were really understanding pedagogy and understanding implementation and supporting schools. And actually there's a lot of AI influx around new platforms and platforms that are doing the same thing and but look at mine, it's better and da 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 da. There's a much more of a genuine need now, isn't there, as schools to audit what you're using, not only for data and privacy and safety, but also actually what is it doing? What are we using it for?
I think we have more of a responsibility, which is just what we didn't need. We didn't need another task for schools to have to worry about, but we have more of a responsibility now to understand that all data is delicious to AI. Like, it doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't have to be personally identifiable. It doesn't even have to be legally defined as that. But we are the keepers of emotional, behavioral, academic data for students that would be really highly desirable to some company looking to make a lifelong consumer and customer from our kids. And so now we're building, I think, for us, certainly at Ablama Learning and me as a parent as well, I think our number one function is now to build a moat around kids' cognitions, to build a moat around their hearts, to kind of give them a way to be protected somehow from all of these things, all of the lessons that we didn't really embed in social media and that digital literacy didn't quite reach parts of them. They still, really don't value their data. They don't value their privacy in a way that we would love them to, but we haven't made the world function for them, around them in that way. So I think this is a second chance at that. And if we can give them algorithmic immunity, if we can teach them how to get the best out of AI without AI getting the best out of them, I think that's a really good place to be in. And that's certainly the goal. And of course, in education, optimism is always an imperative. So we really, really have to hope that we can take all of the lessons of the past and put them into practice now, because we didn't during the pandemic and we didn't always get it right during EdTech. You're absolutely right. So this might be another chance for us to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there are so many concerns that leaders have. So what are the sorts of things that you're hearing from school leaders that they're still coming up and being concerned about? And I guess also, are you hearing that? I mean, before we came on to record, you mentioning, been in 3 countries last week. What are you hearing around the world? How does it vary? Does it vary?
It really does. We're working mostly in international schools. So they have also a unique multinational dimension as well, with different students and different rights and responsibilities around AI, different pressures. Some regions, there's high regulation coming, although we'll see in the European Union how that AI Act plays out. But certainly there is expectations that there will be regulation. There are other regions where they could have a sudden announcement that K through 12 AI curriculum is coming, get ready, but then it doesn't arrive and then things change suddenly. And there are other regions where, for example, they're incredibly bullish on parts of AI and then really protective. So, for example, in China, where, you would have a huge push for innovation and also a huge push for protection around anthropomorphism and, the companionship piece. And all of these pieces are so big. I think what I feel when I go into schools is an anxiety on leadership, an anxiety on teachers, an anxiety within student bodies. And it's so multi-layered because leaders have a unique combination of fear of messing up and fear of messing out. Teachers are feeling like, there are some teachers I'm speaking to now who are like, I just have to ride it out to retirement. I'll be fine. I just need to get out of this. And other teachers who are like, I don't want to read AI slop for the rest of my career. What am I going to do? It's just interesting. It's very interesting, sometimes heartbreaking, sometimes inspiring when you see teachers who can really do things for their kids they could not do before and access new levels of learning. And I get quite excited about the potential for assessment. There's a lot of people saying we must rethink assessment. And I haven't yet heard great answers, but I do feel optimistic that AI could help us do group assessment much more validly and prepare kids for the actual real world interactions they're going to do for the rest of their professional lives. I do think it's a great time for us to think about what AI is going to do to the job market and what that means for education, because we've always been a pipeline for the knowledge economy, and the knowledge economy now is under threat. So yeah, there's so much to think about that of course people feel anxious. And somebody come in and say to them, this is your framework, or these are your evaluation metrics, or these are the things I want you to think about. The reassurance is palpable. It's really interesting. It's almost like they just feel like, oh, we've got somebody on our side. And I think that's really important.
That's so brilliant to kind of hear that there are places and people like yourself who are knowledgeable enough to be able to support them through that. And I guess a lot of it is actually just having conversations and trying to unpick some of these fears in order to be able to say, well, actually, these are some of the things that we can do to mitigate that. I'd really be interested. I saw a post on social media. It was not AI generated. A school in Australia who's changing the face of their social media. And it was really, really interesting around the idea of removing all the children's faces, but with that publicity of this is what we do as a school. And we are really proud of it. Because obviously there are so many different risks, and schools are high potential risks for cyber threats, cybersecurity threats. And with the influx of AI, there are so many more risks. And as you'll know, not just working with international schools, but schools, they are databases buzzing with information, like almost as much as hospitals have. What sorts of things would you say to schools around those kind of legal and financial risks when it comes to AI as well?
Hachette Learning Academy is a growing suite of interactive online CPD courses powered by adaptive technology, designed to bring the benefits of one-to-one coaching to every teacher. The Academy offers flexible, personalised professional learning that fits around busy schedules. Each course is built around a competency framework aligned with international teaching standards, helping educators strengthen the skills that drive effective teaching and lasting career growth. For more information, just visit www.hachetlearning.com/academy.
I think the number one thing is, we've already mentioned governance, to have your policies, protocols and processes in place, to be really careful around that and to have those deep discussions now. We've worked at the school who introduced an anti-blurring technology, but of course I could bypass it on my phone, and I asked ChatGPT to go and retrieve the picture. That protection lasted a very short amount of time. It's really hard to show learning in action without children. It's really hard to show how passionate and amazing your school is without showing the learning in action. So it's a really difficult place for schools to be in. But likewise, it's also very difficult for the marketing departments, for the admissions departments, for finance, for all of these operational functions in a school who aren't talking about education all day, but are impacted by education, to know what to do as well. So it's something that I certainly as a parent as well, I've always been of the belief that you can use my child's face, but not her name. I don't want her Googleable. But now I have to rethink that position. And I think many parents are in that position too, because her face is now incredibly valuable. Her voice, her unique thought is really, really, really valuable. And I want her teachers to protect that too. I want them to be able to put a kind of a moat around that as well. But that leaves schools in a really difficult position. I've seen some really lovely short-term fixes where they can turn them into an emoji, or they can turn them into some kind of filter. So they're not recognizable, but you can still tell it's learning and fun in action. But those have a diminishing return. There's only so many Pokemon character versions of the kids that you can do, so many Studio Ghibli images. And also I have that another AI generated image, and you're still giving the kids picture into AI,
They're still there somewhere.
Yeah, that poor Australian teacher who was just making a colouring sheet of her class, and she just got ripped apart on LinkedIn. I don't know if you remember, because she had given the kids' image over, and it was a really cute colouring sheet, and she was just explaining how lovely it was. And everybody rightly identified the vulnerability. So there's a risk surface for schools now that is so much harder. We think about how AI is making cybersecurity worse. And as you identified, taking kids' pictures off the website and using them for nefarious purposes. We know that's happening against schools and to schools. That's a pretty dark place for school leaders to be in, to think, how am I going to protect the kids' image and everything else? I would imagine, I'm hoping over time there will be a technological solution. You and I remember what it was like before turnitin.com came along and gave us the answer to cut and paste from Wikipedia. So I feel like that solution is out there. I feel like it's coming, but I feel like it's just out of reach. So we have to figure out for schools for the next 18 to 24 months, what are we going to do about all of these multiple, AI impacted places in the school? And then also, how do we figure out how to make AI not the only conversation we're always having? Because it is everywhere, and people must be so tired of thinking about it, worrying about it, getting excited about it, experimenting with it. We need also to think about what really matters, and that time in the classroom with kids, that time to work on our pedagogy, our craft, being better teachers all the time, and having a life as well.
And actually, that's the bit that will make them human as well. Because if we keep just pushing them towards technology, they're not going to learn those skills that we have as humans and adults to be able to be resilient and get through stages of their lives to be able to be successful.
And I've spent a long time, we've written a 3 to 18 or a K-12 curriculum to be embedded in schools, because curriculum's already overloaded and students are already over-assessed. And yet there is a need for this. So we've written a curriculum for that. And one of the hardest parts was thinking, what are the values, the human-centered values that you should put at the middle of an AI curriculum, given that the AI literacy will change, but the AI ethics will remain static. The ethics aren't going to change over time. And some of the values that we kept coming back to were agency, protecting their agency, a sense of belonging, so we don't lose them into virtual worlds or into the screen, as we often do with teenagers. We feel like we've lost them for a little while when they first get a phone. We want them to be resilient and buoyant, to bounce back. But actually, what will that mean with AI? We want them to be motivated, critical, courageous, value well-being, value sustainability. And I think the biggest thing for me then is embodiment. What does embodied learning look like? How do we teach them about AI, but not have to have them on the screen the whole time? That's really significant.
Yeah, and I think that is where I feel a lot of the documentation that's now coming out from organisations. For instance, UNESCO recently republished their digitalisation strategy for education. But what I thought was finally, it was kind of one of those, finally somebody, because it said AI and digitalisation for such a long time. We've been saying AI, 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 and I have been banging my head against a brick wall going, that is digital. If you didn't sort out your digital strategy, your AI strategy is nowhere. And these are the things that are going to become think. And actually, potentially, we were hearing, I felt a more balanced conversation at BET. There was less of the excitement and more of the why, the how, and the ethics. And so hopefully we're kind of getting to that point, really, aren't we? I just wanted to kind of come around to asking, like, in terms of as an educator, as a leader, what would be the top thing, the one thing that you would say to me? And I don't want you to come to governance. Okay. So if we said that was our top tip, everyone's got governance in place. What's the thing you would say you need to be doing as a leader?
I would say invest in some time for you to kind of develop your own understanding. As a leader, you don't have time to get into every single platform. You don't have time to see teacher use cases. And you are always, sadly, very removed from student use cases. And that's the thing, Dave. It's often kind of remarked that leadership can be really lonely. It can be really detached from what you started off doing and loving. And I think that's really important. But I want leaders to be cautiously optimistic that they unlocks no, that's not the right way to say it. I think the things that we've always accepted as unchangeable in education are now back on the table. You know, the teachers who struggled with certain linguistic qualities, or, you know, for people who were not able to take the next step up in their professional development for one reason or another, this is the opportunity that we can revisit those non sequiturs again. And we actually have a way to think about, okay, teachers who've never tried this thing because they didn't really understand it, could this be the breakthrough? Kids who were not learning in this style, in this classroom, do we now have a breakthrough? Thanks to AI. So cautious optimism. I think I agree with you. I think the conversation has really matured over the last 6 to 12 months. And I think some of that is due to some really tragic cases that we've seen, inspired by AI or encouraged by AI. It's been thanks to the reflections of people who are now seeing more and more AI, getting more and more sensitive to it and fine-tuning their values around it. Like, what are they willing to accept? Do they like listening to AI music? Are they happy to have AI mark a kid's homework? Do we value an email less if we know that they've used or suspect that they've used AI writing it? So I think it's really interesting how people's tastes are changing. And actually on the days, you know, there are days when you can go very Black Mirror and very dark and very worried about everything. But on the up days, I think it's really interesting how quickly we get bored of something in AI terms, like how quickly napkin becomes overdone, or how quickly we're all tired of the infographics from Notebook LM because everybody's using them. So there's a tyranny of the commons that I think is really interesting and really inspiring, because what humans will always do will be improbable connections. So I'd encourage leaders to look for that, like to look for opportunities to celebrate the uniqueness and the imperfections in schools. Because I think too many kids are now thinking that they have to write like a PhD student just to submit a piece of work, because that's what AI will provide. And we want them to get the message that actually your voice and your age-appropriate development is what we really care about, not perfection, not copying AI language, not simply completing tasks to get them done. Because, you know, that is it. Like, I'm also in that world. Like, tick, 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 get it done, move on. We don't need productivity. We need efficiency and efficacy.
Yeah. And I think that's so brilliant, because I think that ultimately school is the time where children get to find out who they are, what they are good at, what they do well, what they're not good at, and what they, and that's okay. And to have those different sort of dealings, because it prepares them, right? Yeah.
And to struggle, but struggle productively, and to fail, but fail productively. Like, those are really important. And we want that in a very safe environment. And at the moment, AI has the potential to make people feel unsafe in that way. To feel threatened either as a job, or to feel threatened in terms of your emotions or your faith or whatever it might be. It's so incredibly powerful if you let it worry you. But my advice then to leaders would be cautiously optimistic. Look for the great use cases and to really make sure that you have protections against the bad use cases, and be super clear with your staff. Like, this is how I'm using it. This is how I expect you to use it. These are our rules of engagement around AI. And that, I think that has been probably the most impactful work that we've done with schools.
That's incredible. And that brings me nicely onto your book. I know we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but in your book, you put out some scenarios and some kind of experiments for the future. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell me one of your favorites from that kind of that section?
I think probably, well, the book was the genesis from all the work that we did writing AI courses originally on ethics and sustainability. And I think one of the things that it needs to be tangible. It needs to be really accessible as an example for leaders to be able to imagine what would this look like in my school? Because our international schools are all very different, but actually they're all the same. Like we're here to take tiny humans and make them into good big humans. And really we're all doing the exact same thing. So what I try to do is gather as many case studies or examples or ideas. And my favorite probably is the idea that AI is getting so much better at sentiment analysis. Probably two things. Can I do two? Is that okay? One is sentiment analysis. I think if you ask a Fathom or an Otter or a Gemini recording of a meeting, you can very quickly get all the action items and you can very quickly get the gist of the conversation. But if you ask it, who dominated the conversation? What was the tone? What was the unspoken truths of a meeting? Who's in charge? Who interrupted whom? What are the power dynamics at play here? It is very good. Like it's way too good. And that's fascinating. What does that mean for education? Now, it's not always correct, we know, but it can do an incredibly good first pass. So for me, thinking about our underserved students, the access and equity concern, but also our introverts are often lost in group activities and their ideas can sometimes be quashed way too early. So what if AI could help us correct and collect those micro moments and help us to understand what were they about to express? What was a great idea here that we didn't develop and we could go back and develop it? I think that would be amazing as an idea. Would it unlock group assessment? Potentially. Would it just help our kids who don't always have a voice get a better voice in a non-confrontational, non-exposing way? I've really changed my opinion on introverts over the years. We've always encouraged them to speak up and ask and put themselves out there and put themselves in an uncomfortable position. But I think post-pandemic, it's been interesting. Those are the kids that flourished in a different environment. They really did. They felt less social pressure, less, I guess, social capital at stake. So I think if AI could be used for good in that sense, it would be an amazing opportunity. My second one is world models. I think these immersive worlds have an incredible potential for education and a terrifying impact for students too. Because if you give a 15-year-old the power to create their own world, it doesn't take long to think about what that world's going to look like, that they can prompt and that they can lose themselves in. Like that's terrifying, but also amazing. Like if I could put them in the middle of a nuclear reactor and not in harm's way, and they can see and learn, amazing. If I could have them generate their own virtual worlds, and imagine the energy wasn't an issue because the energy is going to be significant. But if they could, the fact that students will be world builders and world creators, that's an incredible opportunity for them. And our job will be to make them want to create the right worlds to live in, to spend time in, and then to come out of those worlds and not feel disjointed. So that's those are some of the kind of deeper things I want educators to think about when they have a quiet moment. But it is where we're going. We see the huge investment in these world models like Cosmos and Genie 3 and when I stop worrying about the energy consumption of them, I do think, wow, this could be an incredible thing for a historian, for a language teacher, for a scientist, for a mathematician to be able to see things in a brand new way. And for our kids to build those worlds for themselves and for others. Amazing.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, isn't it? And I think exactly as you say, for those specialist subjects or those ones that are quite difficult to get children to understand or to visualize and really place themselves in, it is a phenomenal experience. I mean, I sat in seminars with metaverse public aid, so things like police officers and firefighters and situational analysis, and being able to actually allow them to be immersed within that and to be able to kind of solve those problems. But as you say, be able to understand what that means. And actually for students with special educational needs and disabilities, that can actually allow them to access sounds and feelings and so many different emotions that putting them in that position in real life could be really disrupting and disturbing for them. But it allows them to prepare themselves. There are so many opportunities. I feel like there's a real kind of call to action, though, possibly of saying to schools, how do we balance the sustainability? How do we do this? So for every time you do X, what can we do? And it's not just, recycling everything and not using your plastic bags, but really deeply, to what cost is each one and what do we not do to be able to allow ourselves to have the possibility of the other.
I think that guarantee of deliberate use. So that's part of our thinking was, how do we get downstream of this? Because we don't want to have to clean up after the fact. We don't want to rush into reckless experimentation and repeat the mistakes of the past. So the number one solution to that is always education, right? So where do we start with our younger kids to understand what AI is and how it works and how they learn well with it and what the impacts are? And so some of that is curriculum, some of it is just daily practice and modeling. But what does deliberation look like? Deliberate use and discerning evaluation afterwards. So that sandwich idea, we talk a lot about the human in the loop, but the teachers are the human in the loop here, right? The students are the loop. So we want to give them the idea first before you reach for it. Think about this, this, and this, and this. And then if you feel comfortable with your choices and your conscious consumption, then afterwards think this, and this. Like, did you actually spend longer fixing it than if you'd done it yourself? Has it actually damaged your learning in any way? Like, has it made you more dependent, less independent? So having that evaluation, software engineers use evals, right? We should do the same with kids. And so they should be much more agentic, to use an AI term or to use a teaching term. They should be much more agentic around their learning process. And I think that would be really important. And for schools to do a similar thing, like we're about to buy another platform or we're about to pay more for something that has an AI wrapper effectively. What are we using it for? Are we going to use it? Will it make my teaching better? So those are the questions I always ask teachers and schools to consider. Will it make the classroom richer? Will it make the teaching environment stronger? Will it serve kids in a new way? Or will it reduce the productive struggle? And that's the key one. If it reduces the productive struggle, I would avoid it. Let the alarms go off. That is a bad thing to do. But I think we just need to be much more conscious. And we also need to share this message so widely. So thank you so much for allowing me to share it. And if people are interested in tools like the Deliberation Station, we happily provide them for free on the website. We have a free sustainable AI course that we offer to all teachers and students and school leaders, just to give them the tools and the language to talk about this in their schools. So please feel free to come over to ablamaLearning.com and take one of those courses, because it is our mission to get that idea in there, as many schools as we can, as many decisions around AI as we can, and as many. I don't expect. I've gone completely the other extreme where I'm starting to plant trees and things just to offset the amount of carbon. My flights and now my queries are racking up. That is not a sustainable way for anyone to live. You can't do that. It's an insane thing to do. But it does make me reflect very carefully on my energy diet, because I'm seeing it and living it here in Dublin. And I think we're only just at the edge of this. So other countries will start to see the same impact.
Definitely. I think it's been so phenomenal to speak to you. I could literally talk to you for days, I feel. Yeah. It's been wonderful. Just as a final question to you, the name Ablama, what does it mean? Where is it from?
Well, my husband calls it a blah blah because we never stop talking. It is actually the old name for Dublin. And Dublin was originally, we're very proud of our history of the land of saints and scholars. We would send out these missionaries and emissaries to establish seats of learning across Europe. So many of the European universities are from those times it was established. And the monks, I don't know if you've ever been to Dublin to see the Book of Kells, but the monks would replicate the sacred texts, and they would, not being happy enough just leaving them as they were, they would illustrate them and animate them in ways that were beautiful and enriching. So that was their innovation. And then as the Middle Ages, as the fires burned through Europe, the monks would protect those sacred texts with their lives. And some of the only records we have from ancient Greek are from those endeavours. So what we thought about is that it's essentially what's happening now to education. AI is burning around us. How are we going to protect the sacred texts and innovate so the students don't miss out? And I think that's the meat. And also my husband wouldn't let me call my first child Ablama. So this is where we are. But it is important. I think that's the educators' voices have been drowned out in the furore of tools and AI and innovation. But we are the ones who know these kids best. We are the ones who know what learning really looks like. So our voice needs to be amplified now and protected.
That is amazing. What a wonderful way to finish. And I won't call it a blah, blah, I promise. Because I think the talking is necessary, especially being a podcast. It has been a delight to have you. Thank you so much, Rita, for your time today.
Thank you too, Philba.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into a world of AI education. We hope Rita Bateson's insights have inspired you to embrace AI as a tool for deepening learning and fostering responsible digital citizens. Remember, the future of education depends on balancing innovation with responsibility. Stay tuned for more episodes that empower you to navigate the evolving landscape of technology and education confidently. Until next time, on the EdTech Podcast, keep innovating responsibly and have a great day.